In the end, you still be you. One that's good on you. You said I could do. Stand rules when you do it well.
It's 6:20 here. Hey, Gwen. When 6:20, we got. I didn't put down. Hold on. Check that at 6:20. James, have a good night.
You have a nice day. It's good to see you too.
Stan, you've been sitting much too long, much too long. You know, they got a lot of people that are just sitting, just waiting for someone else to speak up for them, to stand up for them, to do whatever for them. And it's time, people, I gotta tell you, it's time that you started to speak up for yourself, to stand up for yourself. This is Truth with Gwen Azama-Edwards. And as always, guys, I want to empower you to take control of your life, those things that impact you, your family, and your community. This is a radio program designed with you in mind, a program whose sole purpose is to empower you, the listener, for information leads to knowledge, and knowledge is, you got it, power. And as I've said, I want to empower you. As always, and I want you to go to the website at www.gwen-truth.com so you can access all of those great and powerful resource listings that will link you to information regarding your municipalities, your county agencies, state agencies, federal agencies, and advocacy groups. And there are many of them out there. Thank God for that, because so many of you are sitting and waiting for others to do for you. So, thank God there are others who are involved, who are taking a stand, who are speaking out and speaking up regarding various subjects, because as people always say, when the legislature is in session, look out. Hold on to your purses, your pocketbooks, your pockets, wherever you have some funds, because the government will come up with a way to take it from you. Now, I have not always been one who would say that, but after going to Tallahassee and observing Senate and House, which I've done previously, but I've never witnessed such arrogance, I'm talking in-your-face arrogance, you know, from elected officials. I've never observed it to the extent that you see it now, not only at the state level, but the federal level and the local level as well. So, you guys, you need to get informed, you need to get involved, and you need to stand up and speak out. And my guest, who will be joining me, and Big John saying right on. Who will be joining me momentarily? James Bennett, who's a Bethune-Cookman University student and an author, and he is in the process of writing his second book. So he's going to share some information and ideas and stats and the like that he has gathered in compiling his new book, and wants some input from you. That is one of the things that James has been doing, and it's what, you know, all of us should be doing, is, you know, digesting information, studying the issues, getting what you need to really be able to decide for yourself how you feel about a particular issue. And depending upon that issue and its impact on you and your community, your family and the like, then you need to take a stand. And you need to provide your legislators with feedback. So many of them say, you know, they don't hear from you guys. Or they have a meeting and, you know, they vote on issues. Nobody's there complaining or speaking against an issue. So they figure that everybody is supportive. and we know that that is not the case. But they don't know it's not the case. At least they will say they don't know it's not the case, and they have a case to prove that it's not the case when nobody's there getting back with them and giving them feedback. So we give shout outs to Save Our Neighborhoods. We give shout outs to even the Bel Air Community Group and to other neighborhood groups, neighborhood watch groups and the like, who are in there speaking up, standing up and speaking out. League of Women Voters in our county, it's the League of Women Voters of Volusia County, but the League of Women Voters who have members, and by the way, you can join. This is the time to pay your membership, to renew your membership in the League of Women Voters so that you can participate in studies that they have going on, and you can also advocate and speak up and speak out on issues that are impacting not only you, but impacting your neighbors, your neighborhoods, your cities, your counties, the state, and in working with the National League, the nation as well, because there's a lot that is happening. Who am I? As it has been stated, I'm Gwen Azama-Edwards, former city commissioner, retired city clerk, city of Daytona Beach, CEO, president of AE Enterprises, Inc., a consulting firm on politics and ethics. And yes, they can and they should go together. I really, while I was in Tallahassee, I heard about the campaign law where they were actually talking about increasing the amount of campaign dollars that someone can make to a local candidate. We know it's, already out there for state candidates and the like, but for local candidates. And I want you to know that the law that the governor passed did approve an increase in campaign contributions to a local candidate from $500 to $1,000, even though there are studies that prove the fact that when you increase the amount of money that can be given, what happens is that poor folk, your ability to run and to win, unless you got a lot of people out there on the ground working for you, and even then, it only takes a rich person to underwrite someone to get what they want by flooding the marketing and advertising with information that may or may not be true, because there aren't a lot of controls on that as well. So even though there were some good things passed in that bill, that was the worst. That was the worst. Other things are happening too, and there's some good that the legislature does, but there's also some bad, and unfortunately the bad, like the good, we have to live with until they go back into session again. So we're going to talk about some of those things, and shout out to Bethune-Cookman University, who just completed on Sunday their week-long rededication of Hine Chapel, and Dr. Claudette McFadden, who worked so hard to coordinate all of that and pull it together, to the new president of Bethune-Cookman University, Dr. Edison Jackson, and the great job that he's doing in trying to, in truth, get Bethune-Cookman back to its roots. And James, of course, is a current student at Bethune-Cookman, as I've mentioned, and I'm mentioning it again, okay? Because he is there and he is studying. And James, what did you say your major is again?
I'm a mass comm student.
Okay. That really kind of ties into what you're doing in terms of writing your book, and because it ties into communication, even though you're into mass communication with all of the advertising, marketing, and the like, right, and all that happens with that. I do want to mention, before we start talking, that this is the National Day of Prayer. So guys, if you're not done your praying, if you haven't prayed all year long, do it today, okay? Praise God. I believe in the power of prayer. I've seen what prayer can do. I lived it, I've lived it and I live it. And prayer is powerful. This is the National Day of Prayer, so let us pray for not only ourselves, not only our family, but let's pray for others as well. Let's pray for this country. And we ask that the Lord will actually, pour His blessings upon the U.S. of A. and truthfully all around the world, because we all need prayer. We all need the assistance of the one who actually controls all things. Even, when we see negative stuff happening, what He's done is just taken His hand off and said, hey, You know, you want to control it yourself, then you have at it. And then when all is said and done, you know, people go through all this stuff, then we're down on our knees asking the Lord to help us again. And He will. He'll continue to do that as long as, an attempt to, you know, bring you back home until the last breath is in your body. So let us pray for this country and for everyone and all things that they be done in line with God's will. Okay, now for some of you, that's as much prayer as you want. Not as much as you need, but as much as you want. But I pray for each and every one of you as I pray for our cities, our counties, our state, our nation, and the world, and all who inhabit it. Amen, amen, and amen. Okay, now, James, the first book that you had, and he went out to the car and got one, which I'm going to purchase. Could you hold your first book up? You got it there? Okay, hold it up so they can see here, okay. And it's the manual, A Guide to Achievement
and Enlightenment in the Urban Community.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Again, I'm sure you have more, and they're starting to, you know, pick up and in terms of the purchase. So guys, if you're interested in getting the book, at the end of the program we will have James share his contact information so that those of you who want to buy a book, as I'm going to buy a book, I forgot to do it when he was on the last time, and I thought about it a little bit later, but he has one today, I remember it, and I am purchasing the one that he just showed you, which will be on YouTube. This video will be on YouTube so you can see the book for yourself. But you have now started to pull together information for your newest book, and it's called The 21 Truths of Black America. And I find this as interesting, James, not just because it's on Black America, because, you know, we're both African Americans, but I find it interesting because you are a young person, and I think too many times we don't listen to our youth. And then we pay the price for it by not listening, by tuning them out. But you've had an opportunity, I guess, in life to observe certain things because of you attended UCF and now Bethune-Cookman University, and you've had a chance to study various issues, to actually get into dialogue with others in terms of these issues that you have concern about. And one of the reasons that I would mention to everyone listening that one of the reasons that I asked James, because I was at a mass communications conference participating, and I saw him there and heard some questions that he posed. And as a result of those questions, I said, you know, this is the young man who seems to have something on the ball, you know. And let me tell you that he's not necessarily Democratic or Republican. He just looks at, as far as he sees it, you know, both parties have issues and have fallen short of what it is that they should be doing. But in what you've been watching go on, James, in terms of these 21 Truths of Black America, you're saying that your book works to not only illustrate the problems of the current problems that are facing the Black community, but also will help us to come up with natural solutions to our problems by helping the reader gain what is known as a knowledge of self. And you go into that, I remember, a little bit in your first book on the manual, but you're going into it, it would appear a little bit more now as it relates to specific issues. Now, in these 21 truths, there are some that you're just going to hit on just briefly, but striking the shepherd. Why are there no black leaders? That's chapter 4.
That's correct.
Is there a need for a black leader? I know this question has been posed since Dr. Martin Luther King and since the time that we had leaders like him for the black community who would take a stand and who would speak up. And he would do so because so many other blacks were You know, we call ourselves African Americans now, but then we were blacks and Negroes actually. We've been called a lot of things, but not always so pleasant. But during that time, there was a fear in speaking up because people were being lynched still. They were being shot. They were being drugged, which at times, every so often we hear about someone tying an African American to the back of a truck and dragging them until their death or to their death. So there were reasons, real reasons for fear during that time, but not being fearful, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. actually stood up and spoke out for African Americans in particular because of the Jim Crow laws and the like, and the need for us being freed from a lot of the bondage, legal bondage that was in place. But he was also speaking for all people because he felt, as should we all, especially, you know, Christians. There are Christians who do some horrible things, but there are Christians who know the Word of God and live by the word of love, have that as a foundation for their lives. And those who do understand that, to the extent that we hold any person as a non-equal, we're not truly living up to our faith, our Christian faith. So he did take a stand and did speak up. But there are people that wonder, is there a need for that kind of leadership now? Do groups of people, whether they be Hispanic or African American or whatever, need somebody that's going to stand up and speak up for them, or is there a responsibility on the part of others?
Well, I mean, all of that is very true. I mean, you talk about Martin Luther King dying in, you know, April of 1968, but then you look and then you see Malcolm X in '65. You see Medgar Evers, who's someone else who died in Mississippi, and then you see someone even more polarizing black activists like Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton also faced death almost directly at the hands of the FBI at that time. I believe there's a need for black leaders only because it's a natural occurrence in society. At times there are certain kind of strife and struggles that everyone is going against, and of course in America, given our history, it's very, very natural for blacks to look for leaders to, you know, to lead them out of these situations. But we still need self-reliance, and we still need a lot of individual characteristics because people are just natural-born leaders. You know, we say that phrase a lot. And striking the shepherd highlights, you know, systems of reasons of why that does not occur in black America. Like, as you said, there's a lot of fear. I mean, there are people who talk about getting drugged. I was just reading the Willie Lynch letter, which instructs slave owners to take the strongest male Negro and pull him by horses in front of everybody.
Oh, wow.
So when you talk about someone getting drugged by the truck, you're seeing that kind of come down from generation to generation. And as those terrible things happen and go from generation to generation, we're still seeing that same fear that the slaves were intended to have within us at the same time. And the most valuable asset of this book, I believe, will be the comprehensive knowledge of this information. Number 2 on my list, the psychological effects of black slavery. And I give that before number 4, so the reader can read chapter 4 with all of the things that the slave was meant to think in mind. So when we hear about leaders disappearing, we talk about Martin Luther King being shot dead, you know, and we talk about the fear that strikes in our community. It's a natural, it's just something that needs to be spoken about. That is the truth. And that is what we need to move from. Not someone else died, not that we don't need black leaders or anything like that. The fact is that our leaders come up and then they don't live anymore. And that's what that chapter touches on.
As a young person, do you or would you agree that there seems to be still more fear on the part of the older blacks or African Americans than there is on the part of youth? The younger people seem to, and I've said this before on the show, that I've gone and I've spoken at Stetson University and the like, and these are spoken to students who are, some of them Haitian, some African American, Caucasian, whatever, and what the African American students say to me is that, you know, yeah, you guys dealt with segregation in your time, and you're the ones that brought about the integration, but now you're complaining because of the results that you're getting from integration when you cause your own problem, is the way they saw it. Because we asked to be, united, be as one, with the Caucasian race, and now we're complaining because, we're still trying to really catch up because of the way things were, because you got secondhand books and secondhand this, that, and the other. Even though, in my opinion, we still got a great education, but when we were integrated, then a lot of schools were, especially black schools, were closed down.
Right.
There were teachers that ended up then either retiring or being forced to retire or whatever else. So a lot of our African American teachers, who included males and females, were no longer available there for us and to us to really give us the encouragement that we not only wanted but needed as we progressed, from through the various years of schooling, whether it be high school and even to be encouraged to go on to college. We got that in the segregated schools, but didn't necessarily get it to start off with in the other schools. So the question would still come down to what is it that we as blacks, who make up still a minority, a part of the population, what is it that we're truly lacking that would, as you talk about the unity theory, to bring us together?
Ooh, okay. You want to know why I picked this show to come out? I knew I came on the right show because you touched on about 6 different truths right then with that one statement. I'm gonna start first with integration. Social integration is something that we strive for. I believe, rightfully so. I believe that we need it to be on equal footing with every other race in the world, and every other race deserves to be on equal footing with each other. I believe that was a necessity, even though it came at a cost. That cost, I believe, was not yet known to us at the time because we were still trying to move forward. We were so concerned about moving forward, we weren't sure how far away we were moving from what we already had. And then you see the things of schools and things like that. But when you talk about what we're lacking, we're lacking money. We're lacking money, we're lacking financial stability. We are financially dependent on the public sector right now as a race. I mean, at the time of the manual, black unemployment was almost at 17% at that time, and that was May of almost 2012 rather. And that was 17% based on 2011 statistics. Now, if you count people, because our labor statistics are getting better. During the election, unemployment got to about 8%, and that was a good level considering where we had been at. But the thing that the Bureau of Labor does not take into consideration is the number of people who have dropped out of the workforce. The number of people who stop looking for work, who just say, you know what, I'm not getting a job. I might as well just sell drugs or panhandle or do this or that or the other. And that is what is lacking right now. If you count that, right now our hidden unemployment, as some people call it, is close to 34%. We're talking about 1 in 3 black Americans that are out of work right now. They're either not looking for work or happy being with a disability or have just given up on that. That is what we're lacking. When we talk about the money that we spend, we have $1 trillion in buying power as black Americans. That's why I like to say black America rather than African Americans, because you have people from the Caribbeans and all other kind of places who are African in heritage, but for all intents and purposes, they don't consider themselves, Yeah, for all intents and purposes, let's just call them black. If you count that, we have a buying power of $1 trillion. That's enough. That's more than many countries. And the sad part about that is close to 96 cents out of every dollar in a black American's pocket is spent on a business owned by another race. That means that support that an Asian business would have from its own partner, the support that a Mexican business or a Hispanic business would have in its own support, the support that white businesses already have, isn't there for black people. So we're not doing enough to support ourselves. So I believe that's the thing that we're lacking, and as you say, that goes to unity. We're very disjointed, and I believe that social integration played a part in that. A lot of times, if you're talking about somebody who's in the 60s and they're forced to spend all their money in a black store, as soon as they get the opportunity, why wouldn't they run off the JCPenney's? Why wouldn't they run off the Sears? Why wouldn't they do this? And now these businesses are left to die. And that's the reality of that situation. And now, rather than harp on it, rather than point a finger and say it's you guys' fault, we need to just understand that this is what happened. And then now that we know that that's what happened, we
Right.
can move forward because now we're standing on truth. And
Mhm.
truth is the most stable thing out there.
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. This is really refreshing to hear someone just tell it like it is. I'm going to bring up another subject as you talk about dependence on independence, and especially dependence on government. There was a black Republican who talked with me several years back, and this was before President Clinton started working on getting people off of welfare. And he said that, Republicans really are totally against welfare, and I support that because he says the main people that are on welfare at the time, majority were, blacks or African Americans, and he said, it forces people to become more dependent on government, and when you're dependent on something, then you're less independent and dependent on yourself, for your existence and for your subsistence and the like. So he said, and that's why we're just totally against, welfare and welfare systems and the like, because they do make people more dependent instead of independent. And so when President Clinton then started his rewriting and reworking of welfare, and there were a lot of people who were opposed to that at first, but basically he was doing a good thing, did a good thing by really changing the laws and getting more people off of welfare. The truth is that, and you've stated it, that for people, and it's not just African Americans or blacks that are on welfare, but there are a lot of people that are on welfare or welfare type programs,
Right.
and they help initially, and if you need food, you need housing, whatever. But if people are on that for a long period of time, it really strips men of their manhood, strips women of their being a good role model in the home, because we do have a lot of single heads of household who are women. It really and truly does less to empower them and more to enslave them. And is that pretty much kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah. I would say that they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And while you want to help people out, a lot of times you tend to help hurt them more than you help them. I mean, the picture that you see in your mind is someone walking on crutches when they have two good legs. There's no real reason for that. But the issue is that you have to consider the alternative. Like I'm full behind what you're saying. I believe that welfare kind of hurts people more than it helps them. The image that I try to give people when you think about it is a 20-year-old single black female that isn't in college, that isn't really in the workforce. She can get herself, I don't have the numbers in front of me, she can get herself close to 18 checks from different social programs if she just has a child out of wedlock.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're thinking of it like that, and then you think about, if you have a child with someone who is making a modest income, then maybe, and if they don't want to be with you, then you can just get child support from them. And then you can strip their money financially, and then now you have more money for you and your child. That's the kind of situation that's really bad. But another situation that's kind of silent in that argument is the alternative. What is going to happen when all this welfare is cut? What's going to happen if if Republicans just happen to get control of both the House and Senate and just decided, you know what, we're going to cut it by, let's say, 50%, 75%, 100%. What are these people going to do now? What I believe welfare is, more than anything else, is kind of like a little unclear mirror, like a thick mirror that can make people believe that they're financially stable. In reality, there are a lot of people that are living in poverty, and this is becoming a growing problem. If we talk about the wealth gap, my third truth is the wealth gap between blacks and whites, but what is really important is the wealth gap between millionaires and everyone else. When you really start to look at the statistics and you take out public sector money and everything else that's going to middle and lower class people, you're starting to see a very, very disturbing trend of money sitting on the very, very right extreme of the graph, and that's left side getting smaller and smaller.
Absolutely. And given that, what you end up with is seeing truly are more and more people who are dependent on some kind of assistance or subsistence or whatever else. And and we're not downplaying the fact that sometimes a lot of these people do want to get out of the welfare system. They do want to become self-supporting and the like. But the system actually works against that. As you said, if you can draw more unemployment than you can going out and getting a low-wage job, you know, then you're going to work that system. You're going to play it out until you're off of that.
You get it for as long as you can. I will tell you, I voted for Barack Obama in 2012 because I got an unemployment check in 2010, and it did not stop until the summer of 2011.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, I knew I had to go out and get a job. But I was very thankful for that free money that I was getting. Free money can do a lot to win a campaign vote. I believe, you know, it's something that you know that politicians tend to know on a personal basis. But it's very, very true when you're talking about people getting money for public sector, people getting money for school. If you're taking care of that, people aren't going to be thinking about the long-term implications that come with that.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to just be happy to have that money now because you're probably talking about someone who hasn't had that money in their hands in the past. And it's something that can be taken advantage of. I believe that's one, I can't really say fault because it's just a policy issue of the Democrats that tends to cause a lot of problems for the younger people because they don't really understand the full issue.
Right, absolutely. It's like when my sons were in college early on, the credit card companies would send something to college students to get them indebted, you know, and then they had them pretty much for life. Fortunately, even though one of the two of them did start using a credit card that I didn't sign for, etc., you know, but he quickly realized that, oh my God, I'm going to have to pay this thing. You know, like, where am I getting money for that? And Mom said, oh, no, I'm not paying off a credit card. From this point, they both learned, though, no, you don't get into credit card debt. So at least that was a life lesson for them. But the bottom line is that you have a lot of young people who are going to college who end up with their student loan debt that lasts for years and years and years. I know one young lady who went to law school. When she graduated, she had a $150,000 loan debt, and somebody said, you know, you can get a house for that. That's true. Even though there are ways that you can go to work to help, you know, the poor and others and get some of that reduced, but you've got a lot of indebtedness that young people are getting and having even when they enter the job market.
Right. You have, college students. My belief, and this is my personal belief is that student loan debt is the government's way of paying back that money they get. That they're giving out for unemployment, it's their way of getting it back. My 21st Truth talks about globalization. It talks about how other countries become indebted to the U.S. And it's very, very similar to the way that, you know, U.S. citizens become indebted to the federal government, and it's because through loans. You have people come in you have countries in situations, Panama, for example, needed to upgrade their systems. They wanted hydroelectric. They wanted to move from being a third world country to a second world country, essentially. And the U.S. stepped in by using their businesses in order to provide those services right there. The problem was that they gave out loans that these countries were unable to repay. And by shackling them in that debt, that is how they control the country. Because then you can just say, you defaulted on that, so we're going to go ahead and take this back. We're going to control this here. That is the exact same thing that's happening with student loan debt. You have people that are coming out with $80,000. That's almost the average nowadays in student loan debt. And like I said, younger people don't really fathom that much money coming back because you're thinking that maybe if I'm in my field of choice, maybe I'm making $60,000 a year. You aren't figuring in the other expenses that you have to come up with. You're still coming out of home. So I believe it's a way of catching people very, very young and putting those financial shackles around their feet. And student loan debt is no joke. I'm facing $30,000 right now, and that's me going to community college for almost 3 years. And I'm just here for 2 years, and I'm taking out this loan debt and talking about $30,000. So we're talking about someone who's going to university for 4 years. You'll be so excited and happy that they got into the school. They're happy that they're here to school. They're going to go to school. They're going to get great. But then you see 90,000 at that date of graduation, and then for someone who's struggling to get employment after they get out, then that financial burden multiplies at an exponential rate almost, and it's a real problem that I believe attention needs to be drawn to.
I would agree. I would totally agree. Okay, what are some other truths? I mean, you're Black Hebrews, the artificial Jew,
Ooh, okay.
and AIDS, where it really came from.
Okay, all right. Just let's. But before I'm not going to try to be any kind of anti-Semitic remarks or anything like that. I just want to make it very clear that I appreciate Judaism and all of its contributions to the community and everything. I want to make that very clear before I make this point because I just want to. All right.
And what it does is help to open the minds of people as you start to speak, rather than them,
Right.
Just close your mind, don't want to hear anything.
Rather than being apprehensive, I really want to just try to explain the point. What I've heard from various preachers, various historians, all kinds of just in my research, pretty much. I found great evidence that the ancient Hebrews were a race of African people and obviously a black race. Now that doesn't seem like it's for someone who reads their Bible religiously, it doesn't seem like an issue. It really, to be honest, it really isn't. There's no reason why we should claim superiority just because the Hebrews were a black race. But this causes an issue of what we're seeing in the mainstream because now we have a discrepancy in what the actual physical truth is and the images that we see on television. The white Jesus, so to speak.
Right.
I mean, my favorite recent example rather, is the History Channel's The Bible. Now, when you see stories of Noah and Abraham and things like that, and you see white actors doing them in British accents, that's one thing. But it really doesn't do much to contribute to the truth of what actually is going on, what actually happened during that time. And this is something that people base their entire lives off of. And it's something that's being portrayed wrong. So I believe that we just need to point out the facts to that. I'm not going to try to point in any direction. I have scripture. The scripture that really works the best is the story of Samson and Delilah. Samson and Delilah, if you read the story of it, you hear that she cut the 7 locks from his head. And those locks, when you think about locks, you think about, well, that's dreadlocks, right? So now you go on into all this kind of thing. And I'm still doing research on this subject, but it's just something that I've seen that I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary yet. So as I continue to do my research and talk to more people, I'll definitely have more information on that.
Yeah, and the Bible talks about Jesus having hair like wool. Our wool hair is more like ours. There is information that really would point to what you're saying as being true. Okay, the AIDS. Where did AIDS really come from?
Okay, AIDS. Now the AIDS situation is very, very kind of troubling. Now my research started off of hearing the story of a man named Boyd E. Graves. He was a man who had contracted HIV or had tested positive for HIV, and he spent from the time of his diagnosis researching where exactly did it come from. One thing that he points out is about a meeting that happened in Congress. It was a Senate appropriation meeting where they basically find out the money where the Department of Defense, they find out exactly how much money the Department of Defense gets. And if the Department of Defense wants a little bit more money, the people come there, they plead their case, and it comes out. Now, in June 9th of 1969, Dr. Donald MacArthur met with the U.S. Senate to receive $10 million for the Department of Defense. This money was used to research and develop the possibility, now just listen to this and just give me your thoughts on this, the possibility of a biological weapon that may be refractory to the immunological processes we depend on to maintain freedom from infectious disease. This was in 1969. This was before anybody had heard of HIV or AIDS. And they're talking about it not as a disease or anything like that.
As a weapon.
Yeah, they're talking about it as a biological weapon. Now when you looking into genetic discrepancies, you start to see. Now the belief is that of course AIDS originated in Africa. It was in primates and it jumped from primates to humans in some kind of way. Now there is something in the AIDS virus. Now I'm not going to be I'm not a genetic engineer or anything like that. So you have to bear with me on this knowledge. But there are genetic qualities of the AIDS virus that make it more attractive to African American people. Not only that, there's also the transmission rates between gays and straights are also very, very different. It's a lot higher for gays. So when you talk about what's actually going on, and you relate it to the other truths that are going on. We talk about the Tuskegee experiment, where you know, you had people that were given syphilis, not told they had syphilis. And when the syphilis cure came out, they weren't told there was a cure either, and they just let it spread throughout the entire thing. There are a number of experiments that happen within gay men in prison, in the cities of New York and San Francisco, that bring a special kind of question as to where did AIDS really come from? The belief. There are many theories, and what this truth pretty much does is just outline all of those theories. It's not saying anything definitive, because I don't have the capability to make that scientific judgment like that. It just lays everything out and just lets you make the judgment for yourself. This is the truth. This is what really happened. You make the decision for yourself. A lot of these experiments that happen, they believe that it happened through hepatitis B vaccines. At the time, hepatitis B was the #1 STD among gay men. So what they did is to stop the spread, they got people to come in, very similar to the swine flu that they did in 2009, 2010. And you got the vaccine for that, and you went back out into the world. The belief is that that vaccine may have been contaminated with AIDS, and they believe the smallpox vaccine that was given to people in Africa to stop the smallpox, to bring it down to 0, they believe that could have had something to do. There is a lot of information that contributes to this. Not anything factual, but it's very, very interesting to read and use all of this information, many of which that has been proven true, and use it when making your own judgment in relation to everything else.
So you said not anything factual, but actually what you're saying is that a lot of your studies and what you have been able to find, really, some of it is based on factual information, like you said, the person speaking before Congress. Right.
And what I'm really trying to do is eliminate a lot of the misinformation that goes on. The Boston bombings case made me kind of ashamed to be a journalist, to be completely honest with you. It really was a really bad way to cover a story. I believe they handled things very differently. Remember, they had the first suspect, and they had us believe that it was a whole different suspect, and then sought us to seek the Zardiaf brothers. I believe a lot of the facts and a lot of information that came out during that time that kind of comes out, and you're like, oops, this isn't happening. That's misinformation. It's come to a point where a lot of television journalists would rather be right, would rather be first than to be right. And that's something that I'm not trying to do. I would rather sit here in my notebook and read through all of this stuff and make sure that when I publish my information, that it's going to be factual. I'm not going to give you anything that just isn't true. I'm not going to tell you that this person said this and then that person was dead after you made that statement. So when I'm talking about these things, I'm talking about things that there's already a dialogue going on. But there's a dialogue between the misinformed and the misinformed. So no one's really getting anywhere. I say, let's just go from truth, let's go from what's actually here, and then we can start having these discussions. And these discussions will definitely lead us to a better place, because we actually know what we're talking about. Absolutely.
Let me say that you're listening to Truth with Gwen Azama-Edwards. My guest is James Bennett Jr. James is a BCU student, Bethune-Cookman University student. He's also an author of his first book, which was called The Manual. There's a lot more to it, but he basically calls it The Manual. And he's now, pulling together and doing his research for his second book, which is The 21 Truths of Black America. And we're having some discussion regarding some of those truths, but not to any great detail, because he wants you to buy the book when it's available. And it's not just about James, so we can say to everyone, okay, I need to say WLE 1380 AM on your radio dial in Ormond Beach, Florida. Again, Truth with Gwen Azama-Edwards, and my guest, of course, James Bennett Jr. You're not just about selling books, and I know this was the case when you wrote your first book. It's not the case in terms of this book as well, the 21 Truths of Black America. You really want to set forth some theses that people can actually read and maybe become better informed, as you just finished saying, concerning issues that have been out there, and they've been out there for some time, like the AIDS issue. In the African American community, we say that, just what we were just finished talking about, that it was a test gone bad, but they knew before they, gave people these shots and the like, which spread the AIDS into the African American community. They knew what it was when they gave it. You know, they being the Caucasian race. And we will say this, and I don't know if you deal with this anywhere in your truths, that not all of our enemies are of the white or Caucasian race, because we also work.
Thank you for saying that.
We also work against ourselves. Again, WLE 1380 AM on Radio Dial in Ormond Beach, Florida.
That is truth number 19. That is Samboism. You remember Sambo?
Yes.
And like, look, Dr. Claude Anderson, the author of Powernomics, he made an economic guide to empower Black America. And he talks about Samboism on economic and political levels. And Samboism is, I mean, to define it very simply, it is a member of one's race working against his own race. Mm-hmm. And that's all it is. It's the crabs in the bucket. It's a hater. You can, I mean, the generations have different names for it. But the image, you know, we all know that kind of person. It's the Uncle Ruckus or Samuel L. Jackson in Django, if you want to say all that. But essentially, most of the way it works against us a lot is because we put all of our trust. We have a natural tendency, just like we talked about at the beginning, to put someone on a pedestal and have that person be our leader.
Yeah.
And I don't want. And what happens is that leader begins to gain support not only from the Black race but also from other entities. And a lot of times those other entities are corporations or well, you know, for-profit, big money people that are throwing the dollars around. And the true fact of it is, as we learned in Truth 3, is that about the economic gap, is that the people who have money most of the time are not Black. So if you have someone who has money and it behooves him to keep Blacks in that same social status, in that same class, then he will not try to make a direct effort at the people. He will go through that top dog and pay him to say something that will just throw everybody off. And that's just something that...
And keep us in bondage, really.
And it pretty much keeps us in bondage. We see people on television and they're sitting behind the desk of MSNBC and Fox News. You really have to ask yourself, is this person going to say something that is going to help me and enrich my lives? Because he is getting paid by that same person who is getting paid to lie to that same company that is getting paid to kind of misinform you on a certain degree. And as a journalist, I can say that MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News all misinform to a certain degree. MSNBC tends to go to the left towards Democrats. Fox News has a tendency to go to the right towards Republicans. And CNN has a tendency to reach out to the far left, to people who don't really keep themselves up on news. And they're trying to go on that. The reason that this happens isn't because they're trying to destroy a certain kind of race. I'd like to think that. I think it's just because of profits. If you have ad revenue and you know you're selling to conservatives, you know that you can put your commercials for Israel, you can put your commercials for defense, you can have a gun commercial, you can do all that stuff in there. And if you're liberal, you can talk about marriage equality and things like that. You're reaching out to your people, making sure that you're talking to them. But going back to it, Samboism does not just happen on a political level. It happens on the economic level. It happens on the educational level. A lot of times when you get people who get degrees in Harvard and then come back to a Black college, a lot of times, I can't really say it. I'm not going to try to specify the type of person, but I'll just say that a lot of times they don't come with the interest of that Black college at heart. That's all I'll say to that. And a lot of times it really doesn't work out to our benefit.
Now, given some of the things we've been talking about and the truths that you talk about of Black America, how is this impacting our youth? Well,
I would start by going to the second truth, which is the psychological effects of Black slavery. And I'm going to have a little excerpt from the Willie Lynch letter, which this was written almost 300 years ago. 1712, this was written. Now, this is what it says. Nature had provided for this type of balance. This is speaking about the Black male and the Negro female, as it says here. And I'm going to start by talking about what happens when a woman is left alone with a child. It says, by her being left alone, unprotected, with the male image destroyed, The ordeal causes her to move from her psychologically dependent state, psychologically dependent on her man. Let me just say that. So when we're talking about a Negro female is going to be naturally dependent on a Negro man. It's just the nature of things. What the Willie Lynch letter tries to do is it destroys the image of that male, the Negro male in that society, and leaves the woman to think like a man. Which makes the Steve Harvey book kind of strange when you really think about it. It leaves them to think like a man. So let me continue out here. It causes her to move from her psychologically dependent state to a frozen independent state. Frozen meaning it will not move from where it is. In this frozen psychological state of dependence, she will raise her male and female offspring in reversed roles. For fear of the young male's life, she will psychologically train him to be mentally weak and dependent, but physically strong. Because she has become psychologically independent, she will train her female offsprings to be psychologically independent. What do? You have the woman out front and the man behind and scared. I omitted some words for that, but that is from the Willie Lynch letter. And this is in 1712. So you're talking about 301 years later, we are still seeing these things happen to our youth. And right now, it doesn't happen when the male is pulled out in front of horses and the whole village sees. This is seen when we sit our child in front of television when his father isn't around. And now we're seeing these images being very, very... I'm going to say that these images are very feminine in regards to the black male child. When a black male does not have a father in his life and his only role model is his mother and the television, that child is going to have a hard time gaining his own male image. And it's just a natural thing. It's something that was obviously planned. Someone obviously sat down and thought about this.
Yes.
And it's troubling that we don't know this, and this information has been out for so long.
Now, who was Willie Lynch?
Willie Lynch was the first person that taught black people how to think like slaves. He was the one who came up with the idea of learned helplessness before it was the actual school of thought in psychology. He knew that the way he thought about treating black people like horses. If we treat our slaves like we treat our horses, then the same thing will happen. He knows that the female has a tendency to depend on the male psychologically. Once you have that relationship and you're producing offspring together, there's a psychological dependence on that male to provide for you and your offspring. It's just what it is. It's natural. He knows this. So what he does is what Willie Lynch did is he got in the middle of that. He knew how to get in the middle of that process, destroy the male image entirely, leave the woman to defend for herself, and teach the woman how to make her young men to think like women. That is what's the problem. And then when we talk about the rising homosexuality rates and things like that, that isn't taken into consideration. But in reality, that contributes to it. I'm not trying to make a judgment on it one way or the other. It's just how it is. If someone teaches a male to think feminine, then that is obviously going to be an inevitable result over time. Because another thing is that Willie Lynch did not focus on the mother and father. His focus was on the children. He's talking about economics. He's talking about long-term economic stability. And that comes by making sure that you have your children growing up exactly how you want them to. And he knew how to do that. The Willie Lynch letter is possibly the biggest piece of information when it comes to knowing the true damage of the psychological effects of slavery. And it makes you wonder why we are one of the least active races when it comes to mental health and psychiatrics. And when you get into other truths, you find out to see that that's not necessarily a bad thing.
That we are that way, it's not necessarily...
that we do not depend on our mental health and pharmaceutical industries right now. It's a very good thing because, I mean, we talk about pharmaceuticals and antidepressants. You have 11% of Americans on antidepressants right now. And now there's scientific information coming out saying that SSRIs, I do not know what that stands for, but I know it's a type of antidepressant. There is not very much evidence that proves that it actually helps cure depression. Now, but still, you're starting to see doctors sign deals with pharmaceutical companies that work to sell these depression pills. You obviously seeing the promotion, when you look at CNN and other TV shows, you've seen a lot of commercials for depression. And to think that these pills are being distributed to 11% of the American population and they may not work. And they obviously have devastating side effects. When we talk about the people who have committed suicide when either getting on or getting off of those drugs. When you think about it like that, and you think about that we aren't that involved because we don't have health care, it kind of puts us, it's kind of a positive. It puts a negative to that positive and say, you know what, we're messed up, but our minds are still able to be recovered. Because, you know, the book of Romans always said, we're talking about prayer, you don't be overcome by evil, but you overcome evil with good. And as long as we have that ability to discern what's going on and to actually come up with these ideas, we can overcome these struggles that's there. We can't do that if we become drugged as an entire race.
And you see more and more young people being drugged, so to speak, or given medication.
Right, they wanted to put me on
yeah.
Right, and my parents were very adamant. I was going to a private school in elementary school, and then in the 4th grade, I was reading at an 8th grade level, according to some of the reading tests that they had. And at the same time, my grades weren't that good in class. I was an unruly student, so to speak. I got into trouble a lot. I was suspended very often. It was very hard for me to keep up in my work. So what they were saying was that, you know, in order to not be thrown out of school, we need to put your child on psychiatric medicine. He needs to be given Ritalin for his ADHD. He has a condition, and this pill is going to fix him. When I got to college and when I got to UCF, I saw that the uses of Ritalin and Adderall were rampant amongst the 56,000 students that were there. I would have to say it at least, I mean, just rounding the number, the 20% of the students that I knew were dependent on that drug. When I say dependent, I don't mean just they're taking it because their doctor's telling them to. I'm selling it because they have a test, they don't want to fail, they don't know how to study without that drug. And it's a very, very disturbing trend because now we're all, I mean, you talk about more, I mean, that was just my generation. That was in the 90s. Imagine what this next generation is coming to.
Right.
Imagine what the next generation after that is going to have to deal with when everyone's on Obamacare, and now all of these drugs are now available through insurance. See, that's what I'm saying. That's why I believe that we need to educate ourselves on this right now. Because when Obamacare comes, you're going to see a large influx of these drugs being distributed to African Americans. They need to sell more pills. Whoever they can get to buy them works. That's why Obamacare was so popular with pharmaceutical companies. Because, I mean, universal health care tends to be a government-based, a state-run enterprise. But with Obamacare, it keeps the private entities making their money, which stimulates free enterprise. But it's something that we need to be aware of.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you're a real thinker, but you also speak with a lot of wisdom. Are you finding that as a Bethune-Cookman student, because you were at UCF as well, that there's a lot of encouragement to stimulate your thinking and your creative mind at the university setting, or even when you were in high school? Do you find, which I think is the case, but you don't have to agree with me, I know you'll say one way or the other, however you think, that there really is, to a certain degree, a desire and a force to make everybody kind of the same, you know, and not deal with the creative mind. And you've kind of alluded to that in some ways, because if you act out, you know, sometimes there are reasons students act out.
Right.
I remember my oldest was in elementary school, and they sent reports home talking about his conduct. And I said, so what is he doing? Oh, he finishes his work and then he starts talking to people. I say, so you're saying how is he doing with his work? Oh, he's getting everything 100%, but he just starts disturbing everybody. I say, so the work you're giving him, he's getting it all done, and he's doing a great job of doing it, but your concern is that he's then disturbing other kids. You know what I said to the teacher, and I thank God that she followed my advice. I said, I tell you what, make him your teacher's aide. You know, once he's done with his work, let him help you with the other students. She did that, and from that point on, no more problem. I mean, you got young people who are very, very talented, very smart, as you were saying in terms of yourself in 4th grade. And unfortunately, we're not allowing that talent to be tapped.
Right.
And as a result, they end up becoming, you know, disenchanted, or they get bored, or whatever else, and then we've got another dropout, as opposed to taking that creative mind and putting it to in some fertile ground so that it can be used.
Right. Wait. One for the first thing you said about Bethune-Cookman, I didn't have a choice. I mean, Bethune-Cookman was pretty much the only school in Florida that accepted me due to my issues that happened in the manual. But it was the best decision I ever made, because students at Cookman, I don't know, a lot of them haven't seen other schools. So the ones that have seen other schools kind of understand what I'm saying. Cookman's teachers, they will push you. They will pull you aside. The one thing I'm so grateful for this. 2 weeks ago, as you can see, this book has kind of consumed me a little bit. And for a little while, I was kind of ignoring my classes a little bit. I had one teacher in my first class kind of pull me aside and say, you know what, James, I know you're working on your book, I know you're doing something here, but I'm telling you right now that your grades are slipping. I'm telling you right now why you got too much to work, and you can turn in all the work that you've done, but I'm telling you right now that you're slipping, and that you got to remember where your responsibilities are. I have never had anyone tell me that at UCF. I've had teachers at UCF where I'll go there, and then you have that awkward conversation at the end of the term when you find out that you didn't do as well because they didn't bring it to your attention. And they say, it's not my job to bring it to your attention, it's your job to keep up on it. And it's a very, very apathetic way of treating your students, and it's not a good way to facilitate learning. This translates from public colleges to public high schools and public school institutions. It's become pretty much a babysitting thing. And you have a lot of students who have the natural ability, I would say black, white, Hispanic, and everything, who have the natural ability to go. But because the school is so limited in what it's doing, it doesn't do much to really make that student care about what's going on. And I mean, right now in Florida, according to statistics by the Florida Department of Education, we have 38% of our black students from kindergarten to 12th grade reading at grade level. We have 40% of our students doing math at grade level, and this is standards set by the public school, entity in the state of Florida. So let me just say that the statistics, the standard is a little bit low compared to other places in the nation. According to the American Literary Council, 20% of black children are reading at grade level nationally, and it's according to 2011. So the trends are getting worse. So when we're asking ourselves, where is this money going? When they're cutting all this money for education, what we need to realize, and this is just something that I just believe, and I believe that we really need to work towards in these next 10 years, because it's about to get real. I'm about to tell you right now, it's about to get real. We need to start putting more of an emphasis on private education when it comes to our own students. We really, really have to make a focus on that, because the public education system is setting our children up on a pipeline to prison. And Troop 16 is the prison industrial complex. For example, Florida Governor Rick Scott has tried very, very hard to privatize 29 prisons in the state of Florida. I mean, he's failed time after time, but he already has 12,000 inmates in private prisons, and they've done some terrible things have happened. We talk about a psychologist that is employed by the Corrections Corporation of America molesting his patients. And these are grown women that he's messing with, and no one else is really going to. These are private prisons, and because they employ the staff, the inmates, who are mostly black, are prone to a very, very high amount of abuse, not only from their staff, but from fellow inmates as well. So what I believe we need to do is that we need to try to work on independent forms of education, like this book, 21 Truths. I can hand this book to anyone else. I could donate a book to a school, get everyone reading that, and if I can get every black child to read that, they'll see the world in a different way. That's what we have to start doing, is seeing the world in a different way, because all of this stuff is right in front of us, but we're obviously not seeing it because we're too disillusioned to really focus on it. I believe that our education needs to be very valued when it comes to this next generation, because the struggles that you will face in these next few years will be your own. The struggles that I'll face will be my own when it comes to getting lasting, sustainable employment and not getting shackled by debt. But this struggle that's going to be faced by this next upcoming race, when they're dealing with all of our past issues, and we're talking about sequesters and all these things, all these cuts to government things, we're going to see the public sector begin to disintegrate as more people kind of decide that, you know what, we don't need this as much. We don't need this as much. We don't need this as much. And if we're not ready to stand on our legs, that crutch will be kicked out from underneath us and we will fall.
And there won't be a safety net, is what you're saying. The programs that are now considered as safety nets will not be there. Wow. Well, in the last couple of minutes, I tell you, we could probably go all day in going through this. Is there an area in one of these, another truth that you want to just throw out there as we prepare to go off the air? I tell you, I'm buying this one, but when the other one comes out, I definitely want to get that as well, because you know, things that you're sharing, which, you know, I have all races who listen to the show, and the things that you're sharing are things that others have said, thought, you know, and not really been brave enough, had the courage to actually come forward and just lay it out there. And I thank you for doing that. In this book, for doing it really in terms of both of these books, and one of the things I guess I didn't mention was that you do some journalism as well, and not only are you studying mass communications, but you actually have worked in that field, and you do some of that with the college now and you know, university.
Right, I work with the university in their paper. I also work with the Layton Ledger. I do freelance work covering mostly high school games now, just because of my distance and where I'm at. But yeah, I'm an active journalist, and I realized that during this time where I had time to reflect as a student, where I wasn't necessarily working as hard as I had been in the past, or really struggling to survive as I had been in the past, I had some time to really reflect, and I just read a certain amount of books. And when I read the right books, the first book I read when I got on campus at Bethune-Cookman Bethune-Cookman University, was the autobiography of Malcolm X. And this was after my ordeal with the police and everything, so it really gave me a very different way of looking at the world. The reason I never knew Malcolm X's story is because I'm personally a Christian. And because Malcolm X chose Islam and was with the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad during his time, that's a story that isn't really known to Christians. But let me tell you this, every Christian, black, white, or otherwise, would benefit themselves from taking a look at Malcolm X's life, especially the epiphany he had near the end of his life, when he traveled to the holy city of Mecca and prayed with white men after calling white men devils for his entire time with the Nation of Islam. And he came back peaceful. He came back wanting to talk with Dr. Martin Luther King. He came back wanting to solve poverty. And that's when it had to happen. That's when he had to die. Because when someone does that, when someone comes from that hate, and they come from that, and then they come from a place of unity, which is truth 8 in the 21 truths. When they come to unity, that is when anything is truly possible. The unity theory is something that is known in Africa, and it's known by a methodology called Ubuntu. I've got to make sure I try to say it right. I've been trying to say it right because I read it and no one's really here to say it to me. I got to make sure I pronounce it correctly. But it pretty much is the whole entirety of unity. This is told best through a story, and it's about an anthropologist that is, you know, a European anthropologist that's there in a village of black children, and he puts a bucket of barrels at the end of the village and says, you know, the first child that gets there gets to eat all the barrels and take them home. And then rather than, you know, he expects to see them raised and gets to see how fast they run and how they treat competition. And instead, they all hold their hands, walk to the bucket of apples, and then eat them all together. When the anthropologist finally asked the child, you know, why did you guys do that? If you could have all of them to yourself, why not? You could eat for a very long time. And a child just simply responds, Ubuntu. How can I be happy if all of us are sad? And the word Ubuntu essentially translates to I am because we are. And that's a mantra I've kind of had to kind of internalize a little bit during this time, because I'm not doing this solely for myself. I'm not doing this solely for the people of Daytona. I'm doing this for everybody. I'm doing this so when someone is asking questions about what's really going on and they're seeing the YouTube videos, because right now YouTube is the main source of information for a lot of our youth,
Yeah.
which is scary. Which is very scary considering how fast you can put up a YouTube video. You'll have that up by tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I already know that sometimes people put a little less thought into it than you and I would. So I want to have this as a resource that the entire black race, the entire American race can look at. Because I say black America because it's black first, American second. We're all Americans. We're the only non-immigrant Americans here, but we're pretty much here besides Native Americans, of course. But we're here. And and the situation that we will face in the future are an inevitable reality. So rather than try to point fingers, rather than try to go back to the past, we need to embrace the present. We need to embrace the past, embrace the present, and look forward to the future.
Wonderful. Now, share with our listeners how they can contact you, or and how is it that you would like to have some assistance, because you'd like to get some input.
Right. For 21 Truths, I'm going to try to do this multi-platform, which pretty much means that I'm going to be interviewing people for their opinions on these issues. So when I have all of my truths presented, I will have them there. I will let you read it, and I will let you speak on it if it's there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my card, and for anyone listening, my email is james.e.bennett, Bennett, @students.cookman.edu. Feel free to email me with whatever kind of information you have. What I'm working with students right now is I'm trying to come up with a way to financially compensate students for their research papers. Because they're doing the same research that I'm doing right now, only in their specified work of choice. And I would greatly benefit from that. So students, listeners, anyone who wants to engage in a conversation with me, feel free. James Bennett, themanual.wordpress.com is my blog site. I come up with all kind of information. I posted a interesting story on the story behind the Boston bombings, and I also have information on my book and information of my contributing authors.
Oh, awesome. And I hope, listeners, that you will contact James, that you'll go to the website again. It's James Bennett Jr. And you can tell from the conversation that we've had tonight that James has done a lot of research, that he really has put his heart and soul into this second book, as he did in the first, but in the second one as well. And it is my hope that all of you will join in and help him out however you can, in terms of helping him to get the information that he needs and wants for this second book. James, this has just been awesome. Truly, you are just awesome. It's just the word that I just have to use in terms of you, because not only do you speak fluently concerning a lot of these issues, but for a lot of it too, you can also share personal knowledge of things that you've seen and the life that you've lived even at your young age. So I truly appreciate it. And I mean, we've got all kinds of other, Person, Industrial Complex, A New Slavery, How Crack Killed Gary Webb, Mainstream Mind Control, The Battlefield of the Mind, just a whole lot of truths that James goes into, and we'll be going into in this book. And people, what can I say? Get in touch with him and be prepared to, as I will, buy the book. And and I just, what year are you in now, James?
I'm a senior now.
You're a senior, and you graduate?
I will be graduating this winter.
Oh, wow, okay. Super. Well, you got to stay in touch with us, though, even when you graduate. So we can, whatever we can do to help spread the word and get people contacting you and the like, that we can do that, because you are just doing, I think, a great service to African Americans, to blacks, to all of America. And I truly do appreciate your coming on. And I appreciate all of our listeners listening in. Be sure to join us every Thursday starting at 6:15, or as soon as I boot the big guy out of the chair. As we really do what we can to inform and empower you, our listeners, because truth is power. And the only way you're going to get the power that you need is by ensuring that you're informed, and then ensuring that once you get the information, that you use the information, that you act on the information. And take a stand, take a stand for you, your family, and your community, because it's only by doing that that we will all benefit. We benefit from even if one person does it, but we benefit even more if more people do it. So I would encourage you all to get informed and consider, what we've heard James Bennett Jr. talk about tonight, and the truths that he shared, and consider too getting to know your own truths, because the truth, and it says the truth, which the word is, will set you free. And he who is made free by is free indeed, right? I'll let you fill that in. Praise God. Thank you all for listening. Again, you've been listening to Truth with Gwen Azama-Edwards, my guest James Bennett Jr. And like all of you, I hope we're still standing. So you be blessed and you have a great, great week. Try not to get too wet. We need the rain, but a whole lot of stuff going on. So you be out there, be involved, and stay informed. God bless.
With your host, Gwen Azama-Edwards,
Awesome.
exclusively every Thursday night on